So you're expecting the UK economy not exactly to have a great 18 months out to 3 years. What I'm curious about is when you build a model around the UK economy, what do you plug in and how much variability is there around it?
Well, there are only so many assumptions you can make at a time of change and uncertainty like this. You know, we do assume, as you say, that inflation is going to remain relatively elevated over the course of our forecast period. For example, that puts cost pressures on a lot of the UK businesses that we represent and who say to us that's one of their principal concerns. We don't think interest rates are going to rise again until later in 2019, in part because of those cost pressures. These are the sorts of assumptions that we can make based on the data that we can see. However, there then is, of course, the uncertainty around the Brexit process, which does weigh heavily on business sentiment, but which is very hard to plug into an economic model.
OK, let's talk about the Brexit story. Your members are presumably happy about what's happened over the last few days. Does it remove some of the uncertainty around the future path that we're going to see?
I think for a lot of chamber businesses around the UK, it was an important milestone. I think so many of them are subjected to relentless 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week noise around Brexit that seeing that there is some point of agreement between the two sides will be good for animal spirits in the short run. Now, of course, though, we go into the hard parts. Businesses' top priority now is getting that transition deal inked as quickly as possible. And that's not just for the big corporates who may have big investments that they've paused. It's also for the smaller and medium-sized firms as well, who need to get a clear view of trading conditions with Europe over the next few years.
Do you think there is a view now, though, that the cliff edge scenario is fading into the rearview mirror?
I think there's a view amongst businesses that the probability of a cliff edge perhaps has lessened. But businesses are seasoned in the world of negotiation, and they know often that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. This is a process that's going to have a lot more twists and turns ahead. We need to get as much certainty as we can, which is why we want to see the transition. And we do want to see some no-nonsense conversation about trade.
So what does this mean for contingency planning? What does this mean? If you have a kind of 18-month supply chain story, what do you do at this point?
Well, I think a lot of businesses will start to bank the joint commitment on a 2-year transition period. So a lot of them will say, OK, I've got some visibility out beyond 2019, perhaps to 2020, 2021, and I can take business decisions on that basis, make those investments, make those adjustments as I need to. But we know a lot of companies are scenario planning for a lot of different final outcomes as well. Some of them will feel they've already had to push the button on some of those plans. Others in sectors where you might actually get a favourable trade deal at the end of the day are holding fire. So I think it's a story sector by sector, area by area, and it's not something that you can summarise in a quick soundbite.
OK, I'll keep trying to get you to do so. Let's talk about Canada plus.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, precisely. What do you think it means?
I think what it means is that the UK government is seeking a landing zone for our final deal, somewhere between the Canadian Free Trade deal and where Norway currently sits as a member of the European Economic Area. And some of this language that we hear to describe it like Canada plus is their attempt to define that. Businesses get really turned off by this language, to be completely honest with you, because for them, that's an institutional framework. It's not something they understand. Yeah. They want to know about the basics. They want to know who my regulator is, who can I hire, what standards do I have to follow, will my goods be stopped in customs? They want answers to practical questions. So I think it's time for both sides to stop talking in terms of frameworks and start talking in terms of how they're going to answer those practical questions.
One of the biggest counterparties for British business is the British government.
Indeed.
In the UK. The UK, we have relatively small government compared with what we have had historically. What are your members telling you about what their expectations would be for a Jeremy Corbyn administration? That counterparty could change in a meaningful way, and the share of the British government's sort of control of the UK economy could change really quite significantly. Just in the background, how much conversations anecdotally do you have about this?
Well, I mean, businesses are always wary of a potential change of direction in government, whatever the political party in power and whatever the opposition is of the day, because that means they have to change their plans and sometimes adjust their way of doing business. Now, businesses say they agree with some of the things that they hear coming from the Labour Party, an emphasis on skills, for example, and upskilling the population. That's popular no matter which side of the political divide you're on. An emphasis on fixing the UK's creaking infrastructure. Again, another thing where there's broad agreement argument that we need to do more. There is very real concern, though, about proposals around things like nationalisation, around very heavy regulation of sectors that have had a much more balanced approach up until now, for example, and of course about massive tax rises both on individuals and on corporations. Those are things that cause a lot of businesses some disquiet. So it's a mixed bag.
Given we don't have much visibility on Brexit, how important, in terms of the balance of the conversation and how it goes, which do they see as being a bigger risk to their business models at the moment?
Well, you know, businesses are always contending with a number of risks at any one time. Domestic political risk is always an issue for them. Brexit is an issue, and it's a very clear and present issue for very, very many firms as well. Indeed, within their own sectors, they'll of course be contending with global risk. So uncertainty is the name of the game in business, and we have to recognise that most businesses deal with this on a regular basis. So I don't try to over-egg it, if you see what I mean. But there are real concerns out there about the potential instability of the UK political environment at a crucial time for business decision-making.